The quantum distress beacon activated with a soft pulse that rippled through subspace, its signal encoded with the Confederation's highest priority protocols. In theory, any civilized species would recognize it. In practice, Captain Zorax knew better than to hope. "Damage report," he commanded, his 4 arms simultaneously operating separate console functions, while his crystalline skin refracted emergency lighting in dazzling patterns. First Officer Kellex, her tentacled appendages still trembling from the initial explosion, interfaced with the ship's diagnostic systems. Drive core containment at 23% and falling. Life support operating on auxiliary power. Medical bay reports 14 casualties, 3 critical. Zorax absorbed this with the stoicism expected of a Prixian commander. Survival probability. The ship's AI responded with characteristic precision. Without external assistance, 17%. With repair materials from planet X772, below 1%. Navigation Officer Trill, the youngest crew member whose translucent skin had barely hardened into adult form, nervously projected magnified images of the planet below. Surface scans revealed sprawling structures, primitive combustion vehicles, and alarming levels of atmospheric pollutants. "Fascinating," Dr. Mira whispered, 6 eyes blinking asynchronously as she analyzed the data. "They've developed rudimentary global communication networks and appear to have crude orbital capabilities, yet still inhabit the planet's surface directly." She gestured toward readouts displaying crushing 1G gravity and oxygen concentrations that would cause most Confederation species to combust spontaneously. "Impossible," Security Chief Varen growled, his armored exoskeleton clicking as he shifted position. No sentient species could evolve in such conditions. Dr. Mira's educational implant projected holographic comparisons. According to admittedly limited cynobiological archives, these humans possess internal skeletons reinforced with calcium deposits to withstand their planet's gravity. Their cellular structure includes mitochondrial energy production systems that actually require oxygen, the same element that would poison any of us. The bridge fell silent as this information registered. Creatures that breathe poison as a biological necessity. They used their planet's molten core to generate primitive fission energy, Engineering Chief Tuvorks added with horrified fascination, and deliberately consumed fermented plant matter containing ethanol, a compound we use for engine decontamination. Captain Zorax's crystalline features hardened. "Speculations are irrelevant. Our priority remains survival." The ship lurched violently as another system failed. Emergency force field containment shimmered around a breach in the hull, barely maintaining atmospheric integrity. "Captain," First Officer Kellex's voice dropped to a concerned whisper, "there are reports of movement in the outer cargo sectors." Security Chief Varen's weapon appeared instantly in his grasped appendage. The Vex parasites. They must have been dormant in the cargo. The power fluctuations would have triggered their awakening cycle. A new terror rippled through the bridge crew. Vex parasites, notoriously difficult to kill, capable of consuming Confederation alloys and organic matter alike. "Containment Protocol Sigma 9, Captain Zorax ordered, his voice steady despite the escalating crisis. "Seal all bulkheads between sectors 3 and 7. Deploy sonic repulsion fields." As crew members rushed to comply, Dr. Mira returned to the planetary scan, her scientific curiosity momentarily overriding fear. The scanner had detected something new. Primitive radio wave emissions from the planet's surface, frequencies unused for millennia by advanced civilizations. "Captain," she said quietly, "I believe the Death Worlders are communicating." The United Nations Space Coalition headquarters in Geneva erupted into controlled chaos. Display screens showed the Pathfinder being prepped for launch at the Atacama Desert facility, while technicians frantically uploaded Dr. Chen's signal data to the navigation systems. "We're really doing this," Marcus Rivera muttered, staring at his deployment orders. The former engineer had left military service after the Nigerian resource wars, swearing never to board a combat-ready vessel again. Now he found himself requisitioning specialized tools for unknown alien technology. Across the room, Admiral Quan faced down the Chinese and Russian delegates. "This isn't about politics," she snapped, her weathered face showing the strain of 20 hours without sleep. "This is about proving what humanity stands for. It's about proving your experimental drive works," the Russian representative countered, "before the Europeans beat you to it." "The signal is degrading," Dr. Chen interrupted, her attention fixed on a quantum harmonics display. "Whatever sent it is losing power. We have maybe 72 hours before it goes silent completely." The delegates fell silent, momentarily united by the weight of the moment. Humans had debated the existence of alien life for centuries, and now potential first contact hung in the balance, not through careful diplomatic planning, but through a rescue mission launched on technology barely out of theoretical stages. The Pathfinder's crew assembly reflected the hasty nature of the mission. Dr. Chen found herself boarding alongside military personnel, civilian scientists, and 2 corporate observers whose companies had provided critical components for the experimental drive. "I've got the signal pattern programmed into the navigation system," she told Marcus as they strapped into acceleration couches. 5 jumps to reach the approximate coordinates. 5 jumps we've never actually tested," he replied grimly. "The simulator only gave us a 63% survival rate for 3 consecutive jumps." Lieutenant Colonel Raj Sharma, nominally the mission's military commander, leaned toward them. "That's why half the crew are engineers," he said with forced cheerfulness. "We expect to rebuild the drive between jumps." The ship's intercom crackled. "This is Acting Captain Dr. Jessica Reynolds. As the only person who's actually piloted the simulator through multiple jumps, I'm your designated driver for this suicide mission. Pre-jump checks complete. Drive spinning up to first threshold." Dr. Chen closed her eyes as the countdown began. The experimental drive utilized quantum entanglement principles to fold space rather than exceed light speed, a distinction that mattered only to physicists, since both approaches were considered theoretically impossible 6 years ago. "Jump protocols initiated," Reynolds announced. "If anyone's religious, now's the time to pray." The universe twisted. Every crew member experienced the sensation differently. Some reported intense vertigo, others felt their bodies turning inside out, and a few simply lost consciousness. Dr. Chen saw impossible colors and felt her thoughts shatter into fragments before reassembling. "Jump 1 complete," Reynolds announced, her voice shaking slightly. "Damage reports coming in. Coolant system compromised. Hull integrity at 87%. Marcus unstrapped himself. "I need a team in engineering now. We've got 4 more jumps, and this ship is already falling apart." Dr. Chen checked her instruments with trembling hands. The alien signal remained, stronger now. They were on the right track. "Anyone who can walk is helping with repairs," Colonel Sharma ordered. "We got 90 minutes before the drive cooldown completes, and we attempt jump 2. Outside the viewports, unfamiliar stars blazed against perfect darkness, silently witnessing humanity's first real step into the cosmic unknown. Commander Okonkwo's radiation burns had formed a lattice pattern across her torso, following the paths where the drive's exotic particles had penetrated her hazard suit. Dr. Hernandez applied regenerative compound to the wounds, his face professionally neutral despite the severity of her injuries. "The others?" she asked through cracked lips. "Engineer Yoshida didn't make it," Hernandez replied softly. "Chen is still unconscious but stable." Through the medical bay viewport, Okonkwo could see the distant glow of the alien vessel. Massive and elegant, its design principles defied human engineering logic. No visible propulsion systems, no apparent structural supports. It resembled a crystalline organism more than a constructed ship. "Captain Reynolds says we'll be in communication range in 40 minutes, Hernandez continued, adjusting her medication drip. "The radiation damaged your vocal cords, so I'm recommending Dr. Chen handle first contact if she regains consciousness." Okonkwo managed a painful nod. The mission parameters had never anticipated an actual encounter, just signal verification and possible remote observation. No one had prepared diplomatic protocols or first contact language algorithms. A klaxon blared through the ship. "All hands, secure for deceleration," Reynolds' voice announced over comms. "Unknown energy field surrounding target vessel. Conventional approaches compromised." Hernandez quickly secured Okonkwo's bed as the ship shuddered. In the corridor outside, crew members rushed to emergency stations. In engineering, Marcus Rivera stared at readings that contradicted everything he understood about physics. "The field's intelligent," he told the remaining engineering team. "It's adapting to our approach vector, trying to analyze our drive signature." Lieutenant Alvarez, head of security, leaned against the bulkhead with arms crossed. "Hostile?" "Not necessarily," Rivera replied, fingers dancing across controls. "More like curious. It's scanning us. We're being dissected by an alien force field while our own ship is held together with emergency patches," Alvarez said dryly. "Not exactly how I pictured first contact." Rivera ignored the comment, focusing instead on the patterns emerging in the data stream. "It's speaking mathematics," he whispered suddenly. "Universal constants, prime number sequences. This is a handshake protocol." He keyed an emergency override, redirecting computational power from life support to the communication array. "I'm responding with Fibonacci sequences and the value of pi. Let's see if..." The ship lurched as the energy field suddenly enveloped them completely. Warning lights flashed across every console. "What did you do?" Alvarez demanded, drawing the sidearm no one had expected him to need on this mission. "I said hello," Rivera answered, watching in fascination as the field's color shifted from aggressive red to a more neutral blue. "And I think it just invited us in." On the bridge, Acting Captain Reynolds faced an impossible decision. The alien vessel was now clearly visible, nearly 2 kilometers in length, with damage evident along its ventral sections. The energy field surrounding it had created a passage directly to what appeared to be a docking mechanism. "We don't know if our atmosphere is compatible with theirs," Science Officer Park reminded her. "We don't know if they consider our approach friendly or threatening." Reynolds studied the tactical display, weighing options no human captain had ever faced. "Commander Okonkwo risked her life to get us here," she said finally. "We didn't come all this way to sit outside and wave." She opened the ship-wide channel. "All personnel, prepare for docking procedures. First contact protocols now in effect. This is what we trained for, people." No one mentioned that first contact training had consisted of 2 hastily arranged seminars and a pamphlet adapted from science fiction novels. The Confederation crew's horror only deepened as their translation matrix processed more of the humans' casual conversation. These Deathworlders spoke of improvising repairs and making do with their primitive technology, as if such chaos were normal. Their vessel's power source. First Officer Kellix whispered to Captain Zorax, studying the sensor readings. "It's generating uncontained particle fluctuations that would be immediately fatal to us." "Yet they travel within it," Zorax observed, his crystalline features refracting light in patterns that indicated deep distress, surrounded by lethal radiation their entire journey. Dr. Mira edged closer to the view screen, scientific curiosity momentarily overriding fear. The translator had finally synchronized with the human language patterns, revealing alarming information about their biology. "They're structural carbon-based," she reported incredulously. "Their surface covering isn't protective equipment. It's a porous membrane they call skin that actually breathes and excretes waste materials continuously." Security Chief Varen's exoskeleton clattered in agitation. "Impossible. No sentient species could evolve with external waste excretion. They also possess internal fluid circulation," Dr. Mira continued, "pumped by a central muscular organ. If the circulation is interrupted, they expire within minutes." This revelation sent ripples of horrified fascination through the bridge crew. The concept of a single failure point that could terminate life so quickly seemed evolutionary madness. How do they survive? Engineering Chief Orcs asked. What redundancies compensate for such fragility? The human communication feed answered before Dr. Mira could speculate. We're preparing to send over our medical team first, the human-designated acting commander Chen stated. We've detected radiation consistent with quantum core breach. We have experience treating radiation exposure. Captain Zorax exchanged baffled glances with his officers. These creatures casually mentioned treating a condition that was invariably fatal to Confederation species. Request clarification. Zorax transmitted carefully. Your species can survive direct quantum radiation exposure. There was a pause before the human responded, confusion evident in her expression. Limited exposure, yes. We've developed treatments that can reverse cellular damage if administered quickly. One of our officers is recovering from such exposure sustained during our journey. The bridge fell silent as the implications registered. These Deathworlders had suffered a radiation event during their improvised journey that would annihilate any Confederation crew. Yet they spoke of it as a treatable condition. Captain, First Officer Kellix said quietly, the Vex parasites have breached containment level 4. They'll reach the bridge within 2 rotation cycles. Zorax weighed his limited options. The Deathworlders represented a terrifying unknown, but the Vex parasites guaranteed extinction. Transmit docking protocols, he ordered finally. And inform medical to prepare isolation chambers. If these humans truly possess immunity to quantum radiation, their biological material may offer our only survival chance. Dr. Mira's 6 eyes widened in shock. Captain, you can't be suggesting. I'm suggesting nothing. Zorax interrupted sharply. I'm stating fact. Either the Deathworlders assist us with their impossible biology, or we become Vex nutrition within 2 cycles. As the human vessel maneuvered toward the docking bay, the bridge crew watched with mingled dread and desperate hope. Their ancestors' nightmares about creatures from high-gravity death worlds were materializing before them. Yet these same nightmares might be their only salvation. Marcus Rivera studied the alien engine schematics with growing fascination. The crystalline matrix powering the vessel operated on principles that made Earth's quantum physics look primitive. Despite the language barrier, he began to grasp the elegant mathematics underlying the system. They're using dimensional harmonics, he murmured to Dr. Tanaka. The crystal lattice doesn't just contain energy. It exists partially in another dimension where our physical laws are malleable. Tanaka nodded, his gloved fingers tracing connections on the damaged component. The radiation leak is happening because the dimensional boundary was compromised. We need to recalibrate the harmonic frequency. The alien engineer, Orcs according to their translator, made a sound like shattering glass that their devices interpreted as astonishment. You comprehend our drive principles after mere minutes of observation? The alien asked, multiple appendages gesturing at the schematics. This technology required 3 centuries of Confederation development. Rivera shrugged. Humans are good at pattern recognition. Plus, we've been theorizing about dimensional physics for decades, just never had the materials to actually build anything like this. He turned to the equipment they'd brought from the Pathfinder. We can modify our radiation purging tools to stabilize the boundary breach. It won't be pretty, but it should hold until you reach a proper facility. The alien's crystalline body seemed to flicker with internal light, an emotional response their translators couldn't interpret. Our nearest facility is 16 light cycles distant. No temporary solution could possibly maintain integrity for such duration. Watch us, Tanaka said with the quiet confidence of someone who had spent his career making impossible repairs in hostile environments. Humans specialize in solutions that shouldn't work but do anyway. In a separate section of the alien vessel, Dr. Chen and their xenobiologist counterpart had established a makeshift laboratory. The Confederation doctor, a 6-eyed being with translucent skin named Mira, observed with scientific fascination as Chen analyzed a sample of the parasitic organisms threatening the ship. These Vex creatures are carbon-silicon hybrids, Chen noted, studying the microscopic view. Fascinating evolutionary adaptation. They consume both organic and inorganic materials by breaking molecular bonds. They are the most feared organisms in 7 sectors. Dr. Mira responded. No known substance resists their digestive process. Once a ship is infested, abandonment is the only protocol. Chen frowned, comparing the parasite's structure to Earth's biological database. They're reminiscent of extremophile bacteria from our deep-sea hydrothermal vents, but with metallic components. She tapped notes into her tablet. Their molecular structure should be vulnerable to programmed ultrasonic frequencies. We could disrupt their silicon lattice. Dr. Mira's multiple eyes blinked in rapid succession. Such approach was attempted by 17 previous scientific teams with uniform failure. Chen smiled. Those teams weren't from a death world where every microbe tries to kill you. Earth organisms have been trying to digest us for millions of years. We've gotten very good at stopping them. She opened her equipment case, revealing devices that appeared crude by Confederation standards. We developed these sonic disruptors to handle bacterial outbreaks in our deep space mining operations, with modifications to target silicon-carbon bonds specifically. Dr. Mira watched in stunned silence as the human casually reprogrammed equipment to combat an organism that had decimated entire Confederation worlds. The human's casual confidence when facing extinction-level threats was perhaps the most terrifying aspect of these Death Worlders. Lieutenant Alvarez moved through the darkened corridor with practiced silence. His team dispersed in a tactical formation that had evolved from centuries of human warfare. The Vrax had breached 3 sectors of the alien vessel, but seemed confused by the humans' unpredictable defensive strategy. They're used to victims who surrender immediately, Captain Zorax had explained during their hasty tactical briefing. No Confederation species possesses the biological capacity to resist Vrax neural toxins. Alvarez had simply nodded and distributed the emergency red brother masks to his team. The neural toxins might affect human biology differently, but he wasn't eager to test the theory. The ship's internal sensors tracked the Vrax boarding party, 12 heavily armed raiders moving in tight formation toward the engine core. Unlike the crystalline Confederation species, the Vrax resembled chitinous insects, with segmented bodies and multiple limbs ending in natural weapons. Their exoskeletons bore technologically enhanced additions, weapon mounts, sensor arrays, and what appeared to be trophy fragments from previous victims. Team 2 in position. Specialist Rodriguez whispered through the comm. I've got the maintenance shaft rigged as discussed. Team 3 covering the auxiliary corridor, added Surgeon Wu. Makeshift explosives ready. Alvarez checked his antiquated projectile weapon, practically a museum piece compared to the energy weapons wielded by the Vrax, but effective in its own way. The Confederation security officers had been horrified by the primitive ballistic technology, unable to comprehend why humans would deliberately use weapons that created contaminating metal fragments. A rhythmic clicking echoed through the corridor, the sound of Vrax limbs on metal decking. Alvarez pressed himself into a recessed doorway, activating his comm with a sub-vocal command. Execute on my mark. The Vrax hunting party rounded the corner, moving with predatory confidence. Their leader, distinguished by elaborate technological augmentations, carried what appeared to be a scanning device. It paused, mandibles clicking in what might have been confusion. Mark, Alvarez whispered. The maintenance shaft above the Vrax exploded outward as Rodriguez triggered their improvised charges, not powerful enough to breach the hull, but sufficient to shower the raiders with superheated debris. Simultaneously, the corridor behind them, sealed as Wu's team triggered emergency bulkheads, trapping the Vrax in a confined space. The raiders reacted with alarming speed, energy weapons discharging in all directions. But the humans had already relocated from their initial positions, a tactic the Vrax clearly hadn't anticipated. Predators themselves, the Vrax expected prey to freeze or flee, not counterattack from multiple angles. Alvarez stepped from cover and fired his weapon. The antiquated projectile struck the lead Vrax's central mass, penetrating its chitinous armor. The creature staggered, emitting a high-pitched keening that the translator couldn't process. Their exoskeletons are tough but not impervious, Alvarez called to his team. Center mass. Conserve ammunition. The corridor erupted in chaos as humans engaged from multiple positions. The Vrax, accustomed to overwhelming technologically superior but physically frail opponents, found themselves outmaneuvered by creatures who utilized the environment itself as a weapon. One Vrax warrior cornered Specialist Chen, its energy weapon discharge. Rather than surrendering, the human engineer grabbed an exposed conduit and ripped it free, showering the raider with coolant fluid that instantly crystallized on contact with its exoskeleton, immobilizing 3 of its limbs. From the sealed security center, Captain Zorax and his officers watched the battle through surveillance systems, their crystalline bodies trembling with a mixture of fear and astonishment. The Death Worlders fought not like civilized beings, but like natural disasters. Unpredictable, adaptable, and seemingly indifferent to personal injury. Dr. Chen found the Confederation's biological database simultaneously fascinating and troubling. The collected species exhibited remarkable diversity: crystalline beings, gas-phase intelligences, symbiotic collectives, yet all evolved in environments humans would consider gentle. Low gravity, minimal radiation, stable temperatures, and most critically, minimal biological competition. Your species requires constant vigilance against microorganisms, Dr. Mira asked, her scientific detachment slipping as Chen described Earth's viral and bacterial ecology. We're walking ecosystems, Chen explained. Trillions of microorganisms live in and on us at all times. Some help us digest food or protect our skin. Others constantly try to invade and replicate. Our immune systems never stop fighting. The concept clearly disturbed Dr. Mira. Perpetual internal warfare. How do you maintain consciousness through such biological chaos? Chen smiled. We don't even notice it most of the time. Our bodies handle it automatically. Their conversation paused as Captain Zorax entered the laboratory, accompanied by Commander Reynolds. The human officer still looked pale from radiation exposure, but had insisted on joining the diplomatic discussions. The engine repairs progress beyond expectations, Zorax announced, his crystalline features reflecting light in patterns Chen was beginning to recognize as positive emotion. Your engineers estimate core stability within 6 hours. And the Vex parasites? Dr. Mira inquired. Contained, Zorax replied. The human sonic disruption strategy has proven effective where all Confederation methods failed. The creatures are retreating to the outer hull sections. Commander Reynolds nodded. Lieutenant Alvarez is coordinating with your security team to seal those sections once the parasites are fully contained. We can space them if necessary. The casual suggestion of exposing the organisms to vacuum, a tactic no Confederation species would consider for its perceived cruelty, reminded Zorax of the fundamental differences between their civilizations. Commander, he said carefully, your crew's assistance has been revelatory. The Confederation has existed for 3 millennia, expanding through cooperative alliances with compatible species. We've never encountered beings like humans before. Reynolds maintained the neutral expression she perfected during years of military diplomacy. Is that a polite way of saying we terrify you, Captain? Yes, Zorax answered with surprising directness. You do. Your biology defies our understanding. Your problem-solving methodologies ignore established protocols. Your combat tactics demonstrate predatory instincts we thought incompatible with advanced intelligence. The laboratory fell silent. Chen exchanged glances with Reynolds, uncertain how to respond to such blunt assessment. However, Zorax continued, the Confederation faces challenges that our consensual, cooperative approach cannot overcome. The Vrax raiders grow bolder each cycle. The Vex parasites spread despite quarantine efforts. 3 colony worlds have gone silent in the past rotation. He extended a crystalline appendage in what the translator indicated was a formal gesture. Your species possesses qualities we lack and desperately need. We offer technology and knowledge in exchange for alliance. Reynolds regarded the alien captain thoughtfully. Humanity has dreamed of meeting other intelligent life for centuries, Captain. We came here to render assistance, not to become the Confederation's military solution. Zorax finished for her. I understand your hesitation, but consider what you've witnessed aboard our vessel. Consider what my species and others like us can offer yours. And consider what awaits both our civilizations if we remain isolated in a hostile cosmos. 6 months after the Pathfinder's return, the United Nations Extraterrestrial Contact Division had grown from a theoretical planning committee to a sprawling complex occupying an entire floor of the Geneva headquarters. Dr. Chen had barely left the facility in weeks, working alongside linguists and physicists to prepare for the promised Confederation diplomatic mission. "They're early," announced Admiral Kwan, striding into the conference room where international representatives had gathered for their daily briefing. "Orbital sensors detected a vessel decelerating near Jupiter. Signature matches the Confederation profiles." The room erupted in controlled chaos as protocols developed over decades of theoretical preparation were suddenly urgently relevant. "Defense posture?" asked the Russian delegate, ever pragmatic. Admiral Kwan's expression remained neutral. "Recommended posture is welcoming, not defensive." The Serenity crew transmitted extensive technical data on Confederation species. None possess biology capable of surviving Earth's environment without extensive protection. "We have the home field advantage." Dr. Chen studied the incoming vessel's specifications on her tablet. Unlike the damaged Serenity, this ship gleamed with perfect symmetry, clearly designed for diplomatic rather than scientific purposes. "They have respected our communications protocols," she noted with satisfaction. "Their transmission frequencies match exactly what we provided. They're being careful not to overwhelm our systems." Aboard the Confederation diplomatic vessel Harmony, Ambassador Vitor reviewed final reports with growing apprehension. As a gas-phase intelligence normally residing in a carefully maintained environmental chamber, he found the concept of meeting solid-phase beings disturbing enough. That these particular beings evolved on a death world made the assignment particularly daunting. "The human delegation will meet us in their orbital facility," his aide reminded him. "You won't need to approach the planet's surface." Vitor's gaseous form shifted in patterns indicating acknowledgement. "Review the human biological protocols again. I must understand what accommodations they require." "That's just it, Ambassador," the aide replied. "They require almost none. Their representative, Dr. Chen, specifically mentioned they can adapt to our standard atmospheric composition by simply wearing what they call light-breathing apparatus. Their biology functions across temperature ranges that would cause most Confederation species to undergo phase transition." Ambassador Vitor absorbed this information with appropriate diplomatic neutrality, though his gas cloud briefly condensed in anxiety. The Confederation Council had debated for months after receiving the Serenity mission data. Some advocated avoiding the Death Worlders entirely. Others recognized the unprecedented opportunity they represented. The deciding factor had been the Vrax raiders. 3 more Confederation worlds had suffered attacks during the deliberations, with conventional defenses proving inadequate. The prospect of alliance with beings the Vrax actively fled from had ultimately outweighed all concerns. On Earth, the first public announcements of confirmed alien contact had produced responses ranging from religious fervor to market panics. Now, as the Confederation vessel established standard orbit, humanity held its collective breath. In the White House Situation Room, the American president reviewed final security protocols with military advisors. In Beijing, the Central Committee convened an emergency session. In Lagos, the Pan-African Space Coalition prepared their representatives for humanity's first formal diplomatic exchange. Dr. Chen stood before her closet, contemplating appropriate attire for humanity's debut on the galactic stage. The profound implications momentarily overwhelmed her. from quantum fluctuation theory to representing her entire species in under a year. Her communicator chimed with a message from Marcus Rivera. "Remember when we thought detecting the signal was the hard part? Now we just have to convince an entire galactic civilization that the scary Death World monsters come in peace." She smiled, selected a simple blue suit, and headed toward the future humanity had always imagined, but never truly expected to arrive.